Yeah. So before getting into the new album and things like that, I wondered, do you recall the first time that you created a piece of music that you were satisfied with, creatively satisfied with?
I think when we did the first demos, when we were res, a lot of those songs were, She's a Witch, Dizzy Ghosts,
Lonely as a Shark, I remember
Lonely
you
as a
sending me that.
Shark. Yeah. I think those demos felt really exciting. I think they felt like kind of the beginning of something new. We'd obviously been playing in bands a lot. We had a bit of a break before that happened. Maybe 6 months or something, I think, before we hadn't played together in a while. And then taking those and going into recording them. Well, we didn't actually know that was going to be properly. I think we went into like demo them properly, and those tracks ended up being the basically what ended up on the album.
Yeah,
We
they
tweaked
weren't
them
demos.
a little bit. We tried to re-record some of it for the first album, and it just seemed to be less kind of vibey, for a lack of better terms. It just there was something that felt kind of special about the demos. I think just maybe the fact that it was all kind of quite carefree and off the cuff. It had kind of a playful nature to it, I think, which we didn't seem to be able to replicate when we did them again. So yeah, I think that's the first time I kind of felt like we were kind of onto something. Maybe it felt different, felt kind of unique, but it felt like us as well. It felt like we'd kind of found our identity a bit.
Yeah. Has what obviously what you're saying, you can at some point you can like recapture like the kind of playful nature of them. Has what fueled you to make music changed? Is that why you think that maybe kind of happened? Or
I think you're always kind of in your head. You're kind of flicking between thinking like, oh, I'm kind of trying to make music that is going to be like, people are going to like it and it's going to be successful, to also trying to think, oh well, I want to make music that I think is really cool and that I like, and hopefully you're able to do both, but sometimes obviously you kind of lean one way more than the other, I think, and you've got to try and make sure that at the end of it you've kind of satisfied your own idea of what you want it to be and what you want to be. I think mostly because you'll have to live with those albums, and I think we all kind of feel like there were times when we did the second album we had to re-record it again. Some of that kind of focus and enjoyment I think was taken out of doing that. I think we reflect better on now with the first record and on Sanctuary, the new record as well, is that it felt like every decision made was like the final decision, and we stuck with it and we were happy with it. I think when you are kind of forced to kind of retread old ground, there is less enthusiasm there. Unless I suppose you have to go do it. But yeah, I think for me the process of keeping things fluid and keeping it kind of like the idea should be rolling. It should be like part of kind of a train of thought. That's really important, I think, for the end to kind of have that satisfaction, as if the journey felt like it was kind of always going forwards, not necessarily having to go back and redo stuff all the time. I think that can kind of drain a lot of the enthusiasm and the excitement out of the music.
I mean, what you're speaking about being fluid is kind of mirrored in the progression of the albums as well, because each record is quite different and separate, and it's got a different kind of sonic palette to it in that sense. When you're making creative decisions, do you think you're more fueled by self-doubt or conviction?
Trying to be less sort of filled with self-doubt as we go, really. I think it's always there, that element, I think kind of accepting that you don't really know until it's done, and then even then you kind of are going to always have things that you're like, oh, I wish I'd done that. That was a bad choice, or that section could have been half the length, or we should have really gone to town on this bit. That's the reality of making art, I guess. It's never really finished unless you kind of you just say it's finished.
Well, you can start to spend too long on things as well, so you kind of have to say it's finished, otherwise you can start to ruin things, overdo things.
Finding that sweet spot is part of the that's part of the trade and craft, I think, knowing when to call it a day.
With this new record that you brought out as well, the themes you're tackling on it are a bit heavier, and you're kind of looking at loss and uncertainty and things like that. In terms of your own like internal discussion when you're speaking about those themes, what kind of role does music play in that? Does that kind of progress what you're kind of thinking about the things, or does it help you find closure?
It enhances it. I don't think you don't have to have sort of one thing leading the other necessarily. I think they can kind of go together and hopefully sort of enrich one another. I think the song itself is always kind of the champion piece. You know, you can't really sacrifice the song as far as I'm concerned. I think, you know, that has to be the most important bit. You know, it has to feel before it's even kind of heard almost, you know, like it's that journey from start to end. You know, the kind of lyrics and the nature that fit within that, for us, I think as a band, it does sort of come slightly second to the music itself. I think for other artists it's different, you know, it's kind of very lyric driven, and maybe the music is kind of what they've added to the story itself. But I think for us, you know, way more often than not, it's a case of trying to put together a good piece of music and then trying to find a way to kind of weave the story and narrative within that, you know.
In terms of like, the relationship with the lyrics and the music and what you're chatting about there, you often have these kind of lyrics that tackle these heavier themes, but the music is quite upbeat and it's melodic. What is it that attracts you to that kind of contrast and draws you toward that and that juxtaposition? Because I mean, it's present a lot on the new record.
I think that's life, you know. I don't really. There's lots of ups and downs. I think if everything's happy, then it's insane, and if everything's sad, then it's too bleak to want to listen to. You know, for me personally, I think like I can kind of do both in moderation, but I think for us, we've always kind of tried to. Well, I guess I've kind of done that more than anyone, but just try to make, you know, if things feel kind of poppy, I'm quite happy to add a dark, more sinister undertone to stop it becoming too cheesy.
Yeah, we're kind of more prone to writing sort of more upbeat, poppier kind of melodies and stuff. We don't tend to go down that darker route with the music, but yeah, as Felix says, it's nice to kind of offset that stuff with darker themes in the lyrics.
It's a bit more interesting.
Well, yeah, hopefully.
And in terms of the production of this album, you obviously worked with Jack Steadman, but you first met him when you were 16 or 17?
Yeah, myself and Hugh, we went to sixth form college and we met Ed, who's their bass player there. So yeah, we kind of met through just going to house parties and stuff. And you know, they obviously went to different schools, grew up in a slightly different part of London. But yeah, there was kind of a slight crossover of friends, and we kind of stayed in touch a little bit, but we hadn't really bumped into each other properly until we started playing festivals as Gengahr. I think the first time we saw them was when we did Glastonbury, and they were doing the secret set at the BBC Introducing, and we were playing the BBC Introducing, and so we were kind of sandwiched between Little Dragon played, then we played, and then Bombay played after us. So that was the first time I think I'd seen Jack in, you know, 5-6 years maybe.
Do you remember your first impression of him all the way back when you were 16 or 17?
Just fun, like he smiles a lot, laughs a lot.
Very positive guy, yeah.
Yeah.
It was tell from day one that there was sort of a very special band, very talented. Their first album, obviously amazing. We were writing music at the same time, so it was it's really nice to kind of be around them at house parties and, you know, being in the same sort of environment.
Is his kind of smiley, happy persona something that translates when he's been a producer? Is that something that comes through in the music he's helping make? When you're working with him and collaborating?
I think so. I think he's he definitely looks at the lighter side production wise. I think, you know, he's always leaning towards making things more upbeat, I think, and kind of, I guess, a little bit more dancey. I think that kind of dancey element, I think we didn't really have that much of it. I mean, I think, you know, there are tracks obviously that maybe would imply differently. I think She's a Witch has that kind of like slightly kind of dancey groove to it, and you know, there's kind of scatters of that across our last two records, but I think Jack kind of grabbed that bit of it and was like, yeah, I think this bit works really well, and kind of pushed us more to that way in some of the tracks than perhaps we would have gone to on our own accord. I think probably things like Icarus is probably a good example of that track where I think he kind of added that more dancier bit, or at least pushed it further than what it was on the original demo.
I mean, the first time you worked with him was on Atlas Please, but you kind of put that out as a single. Obviously that came out quite a while before the record. Was that kind of what you built like the sonic kind of landscape of the album around? Did you kind of go for that tone?
It was kind of a trial.
Yeah.
You know?
And we felt like it went so well that we kind of then thought, well, if we could do an album, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, it was a case of just, it was something which was kind of suggested to us rather than it being our own idea, and obviously I'd known Jack from when we were younger, and kind of felt like a nice thing to kind of go back and sort of just kind of see what happened. Really, I don't think there was any real like, we didn't really know what that would amount to, and obviously because it's a standalone single, there wasn't really like this huge kind of like attention put towards it, you know, because it's just like a one-off song. But I think we kind of just had an open discussion. Was it kind of like we were going to go and make another record anyway? Would he want to do it? And he did want to do it. And then it was kind of, we were like, yeah, okay, cool. This is going to be fun.
You said as well that this is your most personal album so far. Does that make it harder to collaborate in the studio?
I think it helped in this instance, to be honest, because I think so much of it felt like I don't think I would have known how to finish a lot of it, because a lot of it started differently. I think whereas previous records we've spent a lot more time writing in the rehearsal room, and you know, things kind of come to a natural conclusion almost. You know, you fill in all the gaps, you play through the song so many times that the structures sort of and the arrangements alter themselves as you go. But I think when you're working on the computer, you can kind of just chuck in whatever you want really, and it sort of works. And it's hard to really know how that should all be pieced together to make a record. And I think having Jack kind of come in as a sort of sounding board and be able to say, oh well, yeah, you know, I think that song is really strong. You know, you should persevere with this one, or like.
Well, that was it, because we were sort of drowning in demos. We had like 60, 70 sort of song ideas, demos, and it was really easy, that selection process, to have someone like Jack around as well.
Definitely sped things up. I think we could have spent a very long time like working on a lot more tracks and then narrowing them down, whereas I think having that fresh perspective and having kind of that outsider looking in, it enabled us to kind of positively speed the process up. I don't think it's a case of like rushing it, but I think it definitely was more like, you know, ideas that maybe we would have given more thought to were sort of just pushed aside quite quickly, and the sort of what he considered to be the sort of gems were kind of worked on with more intensity and with you know, sort of more focus.
I mean, it has that thing like a lot of wonderful records do, where it's cohesive, but also the songs are quite individualistic and they sound different and they're all interesting. Was it written over quite a concise period, or was it quite a...
Yeah, I mean, it was maybe with the exception, I think for A Dream Outside, the songs were written in quite a short space. A lot of those songs were written in the space of a month, which we've never really kind of done since then. I think it's always spanned time, because, you know, I think the nature of touring and stuff, you don't have those like long windows of opportunities to just sit down and work on stuff the whole time. So, but this was certainly more like that. I think there was definitely a shorter period of time, and the way we kind of worked was that the kind of tracks that we started with and some of the tracks we finished with, they weren't even written before the tracks we started with were kind of finished, if that makes sense. So I was kind of writing stuff and taking ideas away while Jack and everyone was putting stuff together, and then it was kind of like this kind of give and take where he'd be like, oh well, I've worked a bit on this one, what do you think? And I'd be like sending stuff over it like in, you know, late at night, being like, oh, I'm really excited about this one, what do you think? And he'd be like, yeah, cool, we'll do that one next, you know. And so it's kind of like, yeah, it was that kind of level of collaboration we haven't done with anyone before. You know, we've done it amongst ourselves, but not kind of letting someone else in to that world really. But I think it sort of gave everything a bit of a kind of kick up the arse. You know, it was a bit of a jump start to the, you know, I think everyone felt kind of more excited about it. I guess more excited about it perhaps than we would have without that kind of connection and that.
It was a fresh way of working, where we haven't worked before, so it was really exciting. It seemed to go really kind of quickly. At
what point did that excitement begin? And did you kind of realise you had something special?
Around the Atlas Please sort of recordings, I think,
But I think it felt more ramped up, I think, once we started to have more songs kind of on the table. You know, with Atlas, it was, because in our heads, we hadn't even really thought about the kind of an album. It was like, okay, we're going to do this one track. We had, you know, obviously we had Atlas Please was being written, as well as around the sort of time where some of the earlier songs from the album were being written, but we picked that one out to kind of do it as like a standalone. But I think it was more exciting once we were kind of had like 3 or 4 songs on the go, and you can sort of start to listen through them and see where they're kind of going and how it's all kind of joining up, you know, to kind of piece together to make an album. And then when you kind of halfway through, you know, you're then looking at other songs. It's like, oh well, that song's a bit kind of similar to something we've already got on there. You know, maybe we should push that to the side and we'll work on something else that feels a bit different. It's going to add something to the album a little bit more. So that kind of process was one, sort of challenging as a songwriter, because previously we've always written everything and then gone, cool, this is an album's worth, you know, the label say, good job, that's an album, we'll go and record it. But this was more like, you know, we were writing to fill the gaps almost, you know, like we had a lot of songs, but it was like, well, what song would work pretty well for like the second half of the album after, you know, Soaking in Formula or whatever, like what do we put after that, you know, and kind of trying to think of it as a more sort of a big picture, I guess, but whilst also trying to retain that every song needs to also just stand there and be like, that's really good on its own. So it's quite a juggling act, but I think the help we had, you know, within the group and also within having Jack, who also is, you know, obviously a very talented songwriter himself, you've got that confidence to be like, yeah, I think we can do this, you know, I think that we'll manage to make it all work.
Yeah. I mean, you have various references on it as well to like Greek mythology, and you kind of use some characters from there. Why do you think you gravitated toward that and kind of brought that into the picture?
I think I've always done that across the records, really, you know, always found some kind of sort of almost like a hinge, you know, that I can kind of always kind of open up something that sort of works and is cohesive across the record. And I think, you know, when we started off the first record, you know, all those songs we first written, a lot of them were written in October, and they were sort of Halloween themed, and it was kind of just this kind of idea I had in my head that, you know, not particularly sort of deep and profound, but just kind of it felt fun and like felt like something that could kind of keep me going, and I could have stuff to reference. And I think when I was looking at my own kind of experiences, and I felt like I needed something else to add to that. I didn't want it to just be kind of straightforward, you know, rooted in, you know, reality per se. I kind of thought that it was helpful to have another metaphor, another narrative that kind of ran side by side and sort of draw bits that I liked from that and bits from my own experience and kind of merge the two together to create something which was a bit more sort of otherworldly, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that even kind of comes across in the cover, like the otherworldly aspect when you've kind of got, it's like a wolf, you know, a woman said like this kind of stark
very small
landscape.
wolf, yeah.
Are you quite a visual songwriter? Do you have images come into your mind when you're
on this? Writing? Yeah, I think we kind of tried we've always tried to do that. I think this one's probably the record that's most, it feels the most coherent. I think a lot of the ideas when we went to go and shoot the videos, I kind of felt like I knew where we were going with it, which I didn't feel like that with Wild Squares. I think we tried to, you know, a lot of the stuff was based around the paintings and was written kind of retrospectively, almost like designed retrospectively to fit the work. But this kind of, you know, we were having conversations with Dave, who did all the videos, like quite early on, I think before the record was finished even, about like what we would do and like how we would tell this story, and kind of make it feel modern but also kind of, well, timeless as much as you can, I guess, you know.
Yeah, I mean, some of them have got that lovely kind of 16mm look to them, the videos, the way that they're shot in that nice palette. And I guess it ties in as well, the thing that you're speaking about, thinking it as a bigger picture, the videos come into that as well.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
like one big thing.
I mean, if we'd had more money, we could have really kind of gone to town and done everything bigger and more extreme. But I think we were working under very sort of like, it was a very sort of, everything we do is always very tight and quite like everyone has to kind of like do a lot of the work to make it happen. And you know, we hadn't really had time or money to go beyond the ideas of doing kind of what we've already done now. So now it's a case of just trying to think about how we extend that that thought, that idea, and try and build on it. And you know, we've kind of done that now a little bit within the stage setup and everything, and trying to keep all the themes and the ideas as sort of clear and as exciting as possible, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the title of the album as well, Sanctuary, kind of conjures up this peaceful, kind of tranquil imagery. In that sense, what's your idea of a perfect day?
Perfect day?
Yeah.
Sold out show.
Yeah. I mean, being on tour at the moment is really good because, you know, off the back of the release of this album, the reception's been really good. So, you know, yeah, sold out show would be a pretty perfect day.
Yeah. I mean, we're just enjoying it now, I think, because there's so much work that goes into getting it all together, and you kind of, it's easy to sort of lose sight of what it is you wanted at the end of it all, you know. And I think you're trying to just make something that you're proud of, really, you know. And now we get to kind of go and kind of show it off every night and show it to people and kind of add a whole kind of new sort of layer to it, really. The live shows help it kind of, the songs take on a different life of their own, and yeah, that's kind of, I think, you live for the live, and then when you're finished doing that, you kind of live to make another record, and that's sort of the process you go on as a musician and as a songwriter. You're kind of like constantly in that cycle where as soon as you get bored playing those songs live, you're like, well, cool, we're gonna go make a new one now, you know, so we can do it all again.
Has your perspective on the song shifted at all already, even though you've kind of only been out a few days on tour playing them live to people?
Not really. It's really good to play them live. It's really fun because we'd listened to them for so long, obviously, recording them, writing them. Yeah, so it's really, really good and to play through them, and it's really fun. I suppose I starting to feel a little bit differently about some of them, but
It's just nice to see what you can kind of pull from them as well, because you know some of the heavier ones get heavier, and some of the softer ones kind of become more soulful, and they sort of push and pull in their own way, and then you know we'll probably end up coming away. I think I'll probably come away and think, oh, well, I wish I'd done stuff like this because that actually worked really well live, and you know. But it's just they sort of have to take a.
They do become slightly different
of
versions of themselves. Yeah.
You know, you've got to let go of the recorded version fairly quickly because you know it's not what you're doing anymore. It's like you're performing the song now, and that's different for us now on the new record because a lot of them were written and recorded before they were performed, whereas previously most things were performed before they were recorded. So we had that benefit and maybe hindrance as well. So it's just different, I guess. Now, you know, we're still learning how to play some of the new ones.
Yeah, but as you said, it's because we hadn't rehearsed them. They were mostly written on the computer, and ideas were batted around via email. It's different, and it's weird going straight into a tour having not rehearsed them for as long as we previously might have done. Yeah.
They still sound good though, don't worry.
They do sound good.
Thank you very much, guys.
Nice one.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.